Amen. What is an opposite? In fact, most of the time we can easily come up with the opposite of words. Like, let's do an exercise with this. So if I say light, the opposite would be, there you go. So if I say hot, the opposite would be, if I say high, the opposite would be, if I say alive, the opposite would be dead. If I say wet, it's honest, dishonest, or lying. Healthy, unhealthy. There's any number of synonyms you could put in there. What's the opposite of thankful? Unthankful, ungrateful. But today I want us to think about grumbling and complaining and whining. Thankful is an active thing. I am a thankful person would be an example. The opposite, I think, is knowing that there is around you all these good blessings, but what you do instead of being thankful, you complain and we whine and we grumble, and that's what we're going to focus on today. It's an anti-Thanksgiving message. Don't worry, next week we'll do the opposite. But I think often is a time, as I preach these sermons, and as I prepare these sermons, I am convicted by them as much as anybody, and this is definitely one of them. So why are we talking about grumbling and complaining today? Why talk about this? Well, there's 3 reasons. There are 3 reasons to preach about grumbling and complaining and whining during Thanksgiving. The first off is that it is one of the most acceptable sins in the church. Grumbling and complaining has become not only a national pastime, as a nation with all the blessings that we have, but people can also focus on things that they don't like and can spend a lot of time complaining and grumbling. It's sort of percolated and bubbled up into the soul and the being of the church. Many people in many churches feel like it's not only their right, but their responsibility to complain about everything they don't like. We say things like, well, I don't like the music today. I don't like that song. They sing too high. They sing too low. I don't like the message. He preaches too short. I never get that complaint, by the way. He preaches too long. I don't like how he preaches. I don't like the fact that the pastor went past time. We all pick things apart, and it becomes so part of our culture and our life and our church life, and it becomes a poison to complaining and negative things. It's not only true in our home, it's true, and not only true at church, it's true in our home, it can be true in our relationships, it's true in our workplace. If you've ever been somewhere where there is a negative, critical spirit, where everything is a complaint and everything is not good, it's poisonous. It's damaging. So often accepted, but it shouldn't be that way. The second reason we should talk about this is that it is like an invasive vine. I've talked about this in the past, but back in the spring, February or March-ish, if you don't know, my house backs up against a creek, and so there's a wooded, not as wooded now, but a wooded area behind my house. There's a creek at the bottom, and so the fence at the back of our house is a black wrought iron fence. We don't have the wooded fence, so we can take advantage of the view of the trees and the forest behind us. Well, in the one corner, there is the invasive vine, the greenbrier, the kudzu, or whatever you call it. It's the thorny, invasive vine that grows in our part of the world. If you've ever tried to rid your property of that, it is not an easy prospect. And it grew, and finally, it came to a point where I tried to spray it in the early spring, and by the time Memorial Day came, it was out of control. It was coming into our yard, and it was overtaking our yard. And I finally had to do something about it. Marina and the girls were gone for the weekend, and so it was just me. And so I finally, it was one of those hot days at the early part of in May, and So I had on a sweatshirt. I had on as many clothes as I could have to shield myself from these thorns and the vines. And I had a long machete. And I went out there and I cut them all back. And I tore up my clothes, but I succeeded. It was a long and arduous process. And by the time I finally cut all those things back, I was finally able to get that invasive vine out of there. And I used some chemicals, and so now it's gone, and it hasn't come back until next spring, probably. But so often is the case, they always grow back. They always come back. And if we're not active in trying to come to a place where we need to deal with grumbling and complaining, it will continue to bubble up just like any other sin, just like anything else. If we don't stay on offense, we will find ourselves continually struggling with and being critical of and grumbling about and having a negative attitude about things. And so we must look at them as an invasive, intrusive spirit. Third reason we need to talk about this is because God takes grumbling very seriously. God takes grumbling very seriously. The Bible talks about it a fair amount. And in the history of God's people, this was one of the most profound and returning sins that came up again and again and again in the Old Testament. And if you have your Bibles today, we're going to walk through the narrative of the complaining and the whining and the grumbling that the Israelite nation did. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Exodus chapter 15 is where we're going to start. We're going to walk through the Old Testament, and then we're going to come to the New Testament. We're going to make a point here at the end. So if you have your Bible, if you have your device, turn to Exodus chapter 15. Let me give you a little background here of what is going on. For nearly 400 years, the Israelites were residents in the nation of Egypt. If you remember your Old Testament story, you know, Joseph, coat of many colors, goes to Egypt, his brothers come down, yada, 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 think he's dead, that whole story. Well, that's how they got there. And when they get there, they settle there, and they were welcome guests, and they were honored guests in the Egyptian nation. And so what happened after that is somewhere along history, we don't have it recorded in Scripture, the Israelites went from welcome guests to slaves. So now they were slaves of the nation of Egypt. And so now Joseph's gone, the patriarchs are gone, the nation of Israel is put into forced labor, and all of God's people are slaves. They were not only enslaving them, but they were also giving them the resources they needed to do the work they were going to do. They weren't giving them the resources. They were killing their children when they were born because they were multiplying too much. It was very much an oppressive thing. But God stepped in, and He set them free through the 10 plagues and the various miracles. He called them out of Egypt. God parted the Red Sea. They walked across on dry ground. God had led them by a pillar of fire that went before them in the nighttime and smoke that went before them in the daytime. God was with them doing miracles constantly. And after 400 years of being in Egypt, they are finally set free. No more bondage, no more chains, no more forced labor. They are a free people. They have been free for a total of 3 days when we pick up our narrative. 3 days. And I want you to see their attitude here. So turn with me as we start this morning, Exodus chapter 15. Exodus chapter 15 is where we're going to read, and it says this in verses 22 through 24. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we to drink?" They've been free for 3 days. This nation of Israel, this generation of people, have and will experience the most amount of miraculous things by the hand of God that any other group of people will ever experience. They've just seen 10 plagues be laid out on the nation of Egypt. They've just walked through this Red Sea on dry land. They've seen Pharaoh, the most powerful army in the world. They have seen his army laid waste in the Red Sea. And they walk through and they begin to grumble because they're thirsty and they don't have any water and they're hot and there's sand everywhere and it's just not comfortable. And they whine. And they cannot see God's blessings all around them. They have been delivered from the most powerful ruler in the world. And they don't see the blessings around them. They don't see what God has done. So they complain. Let's go a little further. Chapter 16. Moses takes care of that. Now in 16, verses 2 through 3, it comes up again. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve, this entire assembly to death." I want to go back to bondage because at least there I could eat. I want to go back to the old way because there we had pots of meat. We're out here in this desert. We got water, but we don't have any food. It's hot. We're walking all the time. Where are we going? I don't know what's happening. Step back and see the hand of God working in your life. They want to go back to Egypt, to forced labor. They want to go back to not knowing if their children are going to be executed by the hand of Pharaoh. They want to go back to not having the resources to build bricks and do all of these things. They want to go back to that way of life because, hey, at least our bellies were full. Somewhat. They don't remember their history and what has happened. And so when God does something amazing, he lets manna fall from heaven. Every night it falls 6 nights, and the 7th day it doesn't. But on the 6th night they gather twice as much as what what they have, so that they can eat all throughout the day. God provides them with food, and read along with me. 16:31. It says this: "The people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed, and tasted like wafers made with honey." God gives them heavenly cereal and food every single day. And it tastes good. It's not like styrofoam wafers we eat sometimes. It was free food every day. And it tasted good. Now you have to imagine they're going to be thankful. Now they're thankful because they have everything they want. I mean, bread falls from heaven. You just got to step outside your door and pick it up. They got water. They got bread. They're not working forced labor day and night. They got everything they want. It's okay, right? Their grumbling days are past them. Well, you would be wrong. Chapter 17, verses 1 through 4. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses said, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." They're ready to kill Moses. They have immediately forgotten the plagues, the Red Sea, the pillar of fire, the water, the manna. They have forgotten all of these things, and now, even after all of those miracles, after God has provided all of those things and all those incredible blessings, the nation of Israelites said, "You brought us out here to die." Do you not understand the blessings? Do you not see what God has done? So what happens? God brings Moses out of a rock. God brings water out of a rock. He did not bring Moses out of a rock. God brought water out of a rock. So they got water from a rock. They got bread from heaven. He's given them meat in the form of birds, and they have water coming out of all of these places. And now they're happy. Now everything will be good. God's given them quail. He's given them manna. He's given them water. They will never complain again. They have everything they want. Well, you're wrong. In fact, it just cycles over again and again. As a matter of fact, every morning God rains down this manna from heaven and they eat it. And they start complaining about everything else. You know what they complain about now? Now they're going to complain about they don't have enough variety. It's the same thing every day, every day, every day. You know, we look at these complaints and you can't half blame them, especially in our world. We walk into a store and you say we want to buy cereal. There's no less than 200 different kinds of cereal in the store. The healthy stuff that's up out of reach to the sugary stuff that's at kid level. We have plenty of variety. We have plenty of choices, hundreds of different things. But they start complaining. There's not enough variety. They don't get what they want. There's the same thing. It's like opening the pantry that's full of stuff and say, there's nothing to eat. It's like opening the refrigerator that's full of food and say, there's nothing in here. You want to go out to eat tonight? But we would know nothing about that. God provides all that they need. But they're complaining because there's not enough variety. How could people do that? How could they do that? You see, this cycle continues on and on and on. And Israel's grumbling and complaining is going to reach a fever pitch over in the book of Numbers. If you turn past Leviticus and go to Numbers chapter 14. They've gone to the mountain, they've got the 10 Commandments, there's the golden calf, that whole incident has happened. They are now at the Jordan River. You know, they sent in the 10 spies, you know. 10 were bad and 2 were good. If you know that old song, 10 were bad and 2 were good. If you don't know it, I'll teach you sometime when I can sing again. This one happens in Numbers chapter 14. Verses 1 through 4, they've got the report. 10 say we can't do it. Joshua and Caleb say, yeah, we can. Chapter 14, verses 1 through 4. That night, all the people of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt or in this desert. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. It's like these people have never been in this situation before. But these are the same people with their own eyes witnessed 10 plagues. Witnessed a sea being parted and crossing it on dry land. Watch that same sea envelop an entire army. Have been led forth by a pillar of fire or a pillar of smoke day and night. It's the same group of people who have seen water come from rocks, have seen bread fall from heaven, have seen quail overrun their camps. They have watched God provide for them over and over and over and over again. And they've seen the mighty hand of God do so many things. And they've been blessed in so many ways, yet all they can think of is what they don't have. And all they can think of is what they can't do. And all they complain about is what they see in front of them, and they don't understand the power of the one who goes behind them. They don't understand the power of God because all they see are the obstacles in their way, and so they grumble and they complain and they say, we just want to go back to Egypt. We just want to go back to the way it was. So what happens? Numbers chapter 14, verses 11 through 12. The Lord has enough. The Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all the miraculous signs I have performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them. But I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they. God's had it. He's had enough. He's saying, I can't do enough miracles to make these people trust me. There's nothing I can do that will make these people trust me. And they had far and away the most amount of tangible miracles done in their presence, and yet they still do not trust God. They are still not thankful for what God has done for them. And God said, I've had enough. I'm going to send a plague. I'm going to wipe the whole nation out. Moses, we'll start over with you. Moses begs and pleads for mercy on his people. And God did. God spared the nation of Israel. However, that entire generation never crossed into the promised land, including Moses. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years because of their ingratefulness and because of their sin. God had had enough of their whining. It's like one commentator said, it's like a parent taking whining, ungrateful children on a road trip for a lifetime. So what happens? What happens? The nation of Israel stops, lands there, and they now are going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Excuse me. That really sounds loud when I drink with the microphone right there. I'm sorry about that. I'll have to go listen to that online later. So if you fast forward 1,600 years, the nation of Israel has risen through Saul and David and Solomon, and the kingdom has divided, and they've been taken into captivity, and they've been brought back by Nebuchadnezzar and Zerubbabel and Nehemiah. Not Nebuchadnezzar. They've been taken by Nebuchadnezzar. Nehemiah brings them back. The city of Jerusalem is built. Jesus comes. Jesus dies. The new church is started. And God is now speaking through the Apostle Paul to the church in Corinth. And Paul is writing this letter to the church, and Paul is trying to give the Corinthians a history lesson. And he's trying to remind them that about this very time in the desert. And he's talking about these 40 years, and God is pointing out their sins, the recurring perpetual sins that over 40 years kept coming up again and again and again. So turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 10 with me. And this is Paul recounting this time in history that we just walked through. And Paul says this to the Corinthian church about the Israelite nation in the wilderness. 1 Corinthians 10, verses 7 through 10. You see, Paul's going to lay out here 4 different sins, 4 different things that the Israelites did. 1 Corinthians 10, verses 7 through 10 says this. Let's back up to 6. Now these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. Well, what are they? First one is this: do not be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in pagan revelry. We should not commit sexual immorality as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 of them died. We should not test the Lord as some of them did and were killed by snakes. And do not grumble as some of them did and were killed by the destroying angels. And he wraps it up this way in verse 11. These things happened to them as examples and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the fulfillment of the ages has come. 1,600 years have come and gone since the nation of Israel came to the river Jordan, and Moses spared them by pleading with God. 1,600 years later, and the Apostle Paul speaks to the Corinthian church, the New Testament church, to you and I. And he says to look back all those years and learn from their bad example. Don't be like that. We look at that list of sins. The fourth one is actually the climax of the whole thing. Paul says the worst of Israel's sin was the grumbling because it happened over and over and over and over again. It was their national pastime. It's good to see not much has changed in all these millennia. We love to complain and we love to grumble. And it breaks the heart of God. Because it's us saying to God, I don't care about all these blessings. I just want what you haven't given me yet. I'm not going to stop and thank you for all of the things that I have in my life, for my health and my safety and my family and the roof over my head and a car that runs and food in my belly and whatever it may be. I'm not going to thank you for these things. I'm going to be upset because you didn't give me that. I'm going to be upset because you didn't grant me this in life. It's looking God in the face and saying, I don't care what you've given me. I want more. It's hard to deal with sometimes when we paint it in that picture. And we look at these things and we see the presence and the glory and the goodness of God was right in front of the Israelite people. We look at it with a perspective of history. And you look at this nation of Israel and how they saw the hand of God moving in their life on a daily basis. All of the things that they saw, everything that happened to them, how God provided for them. They didn't have a job. They didn't have to go to the grocery store every day. It was God's version of Uber. It was right here. It came to their house every day. And it wasn't enough. God literally led them and told them where to go. They had to wake up and they say, oh, the pillar of fire is moving. Oh, the smoke's moving. I guess we should go over here. You and I don't get that. God doesn't say, hey, you go here today, and then you go there, and then you go here. We don't get that. They did. But yet they complained because they couldn't trust God. They didn't think God was great enough. So the question really for today, as we get ready to come into this Thanksgiving season, is grumbling and complaining and whining always a sin? Is it always a sin? Short answer is yeah. God takes grumbling seriously. Just read what James says. James chapter 5. James chapter 5, verse 9. Chapter 5, verse 9. Let's back up to verse 7. We'll read the whole paragraph in context here. Be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, and now how patient he is for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Verse 9, here's the one to remember. Don't grumble against each other, brothers, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. We're quick to assign God's wrath to stealing or lying or any number of sexual sin or murder. But James here says, don't grumble against each other. Don't do it, because you will be judged. It's an interesting way to look at it. What I mean by grumbling and complaining and whining is looking at the goodness of God that is in front of you. You look at the blessings that you have and say, oh, I can't trust God. God, I can't. God, why can't you? God, I don't have enough. God, I don't know if I can trust you. We grumble or complain. He is present and active in our lives, and he's caring for you, and all you can do is focus, and all we can do is focus on the things that we don't have. And we can only focus on the things that we want. And we can't stop and thank him for all of those things. I've talked about this before, but sometime, and maybe this is as good a time as any, to step back and do an inventory of all the ways that God has blessed you. And don't think about just the tangible ways, the house that you have, the car that you have, the food that you have. Maybe thank Him for how He prevented you from that accident you had no idea you could have had. Think of how he kept you from harm. I'm always reminded of Riley was just a baby. We were living in Indiana, and we were traveling from Indiana to Arkansas to be with family for Thanksgiving. And we were traveling south through Illinois. If you've ever traveled, there's an interstate that goes north to south from Chicago down towards Memphis. It's called I-57. As we were going down I-57 that day, Marina was driving, I was sleeping, and Riley was asleep in the back, obviously. And Marina had slowed down for some reason, and in the process of that, a semi went past us, going pretty fast. He was speeding, which, not uncommon on the interstate. It wasn't 2 minutes later, he disappeared over a hill, and when we got up to the hill, he was gone. He had, for some reason, something happened and he fell asleep or he lost control, and he went into the ditch. He turned the semi over, and it completely destroyed the cab. And Marino had been working at the ER as an ER nurse for 2 weeks. She said, well, so she stopped and she went to help, and about that time, a state trooper showed up, and there was a kid in the back, and it was not good. And I say that to say, if we'd have been going a little faster, if that timing had been just a little different, he could have very much run us off the interstate. So are you thankful for how God protects you in ways you don't even know? Let's see, grumbling, it poisons our spirit, it poisons our homes, it crushes our marriages, it destroys the local communities and churches and workplaces. There are so many things we could be thankful for, but we get fixated on what we don't have and what we want, and we complain and we grumble when we don't get our way. We have amazingly wonderful blessings in front of us, and we pick out the one little thing that we don't like, and we let it ruin our whole spirit, our whole everything. So the question becomes, how and is it ever appropriate to express real concern? And I think, how do we do that? Simple way. 4 things, quickly. It says this: do it at the right time. Do it at the right time. Seek the Lord's help. If there's something that happens on a Sunday morning, I can tell you this as someone, a bad time to bring a complaint to me is 30 seconds before I walk up on stage. Don't do that, please. Seek the right time. Second, bring it with the right spirit. If you go into a situation like that with guns blazing and accusatory language, if you're married and you're talking to your spouse, or if you're dealing with a family or workplace and you have a valid concern, not a personal taste thing, but a genuine valid concern, come with the right heart. Come with gentle humility. Don't come to win a fight. Come in it to express a concern. Number 3, go to the right person. It's code for don't gossip. Go to the source. Go to the right person. 4th, go with the right response. Share what's on your heart. Pray that God will do something good through this. Trust in God and move on. You see, that's how you bring a complaint. That's how you talk about things. We don't grumble. We don't complain. We don't allow it to fester and hurt our spirit. One commentator said it this way: to grumble is to leak darkness when we were made to shine. To grumble is to leak darkness when we were made to shine. Each of us can think of a grumbler or a natural complainer in our family. in our neighborhood, in our workplace, or somewhere in our life. I'll never forget the first time I complained about being tired to my now father-in-law. It's about 11 years ago. Maureen and I were still dating, and I'd gone to the first family get-together thing, and we were talking, and I was sitting there talking to Bob, and I was making small talk with someone you've never met. And I said, we were talking about something, and I said, yeah, I'm just really tired lately. And Bob said something that has stuck with me to this day, and I've said it here before, I've said it to a lot of people, and he said this, he said, well, the world's run by tired people. AKA, don't whine about it because we're all tired. Don't complain because we're all tired. We all could use more sleep. We all were kept up by kids or pains or worries or pets. And it's so true. And it's not true with just tiredness. It's true with money, time, possessions. Don't complain. Go to the one who can fix it. We are called to be transformed into lights for this world. Read with me from Paul's letter to the church at Philippi, Philippians chapter 2, verses 14 through 18. This is in the middle of this section about shining like stars. And he says this, do everything, here you go, without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like stars in the universe. As you hold out the word of life in order that I may boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor for nothing, but even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you, so you too should be glad and rejoice with me. Shine like stars in a dark world. In the midst of difficult situations, give thanks and rejoice. Grumbling and complaining is the opposite of thankfulness. It's the way of the world. Complaining is a way of fear. It's the way our sinful nature, and it's the way of darkness, but gratitude and thankfulness is trusting in the Spirit, is trusting in God. It's the way of shining in this world. God has been so good to us, to me and to you. He died on the cross. He rose again. He broke the power of sin and death. He gave his life for us. And if you are a Christ follower, you have that blessing in the heavenly, in heavens beyond, and spend eternity with him. Focus on that. No matter how bad things are. You may be broke, you may be going through bankruptcy, you may be terminally sick, you may have no possessions, you may have nothing. But if you're a Christ follower, you have everything because you have eternity with him. And we have nothing to complain about. Grumbling affects our attitude. It affects how we approach Jesus. So I pray today is that we will come to Jesus, and we will drop the complaining, we will drop the grumbling, and simply find the thanks in our everyday life. Find the things that we can be thankful for. You see, the children of Israel that left Egypt, they had been blessed with so many miracles. And God literally led them by the hand from the nation of Egypt through the wilderness, over the Red Sea, into the wilderness. He fed them. He gave them water. He gave them laws. He gave them rules. He told them when to stop. He told them when to go. He showed them how to build the temple. He showed them how to do all of these things. God was there for them in so many ways. But in all of that, the nation of Israel said, ugh, I just want to go back to Egypt. Ugh, I wish I could go back. See the goodness in your life. Look at the goodness of the things in your life that God has done for you and say, God, I will be thankful despite this. God, I will be thankful in the midst of this. God, I will be thankful even though. Because no matter what is going on in your life, no matter what is being taken from you, no matter what sickness you're going through, God is always greater and God will always guide you through. Yeah, it's easy to grumble and complain because that's what we do as a nation. We're a nation of whiners. But take solace in the goodness of God. Place your faith in the goodness and greatness of the one who died on a cross for you, who rose from the dead, and who invites us to spend eternity with him if we will just place our faith in him. As we come to this time of invitation today, if you have never placed your faith in Jesus Christ, I pray that you will come today, seek me out, seek out someone so we can talk about how you inherit that life, how you inherit that gift. Let's stand together as we sing this morning, this song together.